guys, and welcome back to Cobalt Elbow. Today, I am going to complete the series, the Powerlifters Hold the Key series. This is Powerlifters Hold the Key Part 3. Maybe they don't hold the key. That's what this video is about. I think I bit off a little bit more than I could chew with this whole video series idea. Powerlifting is actually pretty complex. There are so many different programs, and each program is very deep, and it's just too much for me to try and encapsulate the entire ethos of powerlifting programming in one video. Every hour of research I've done on this topic of like researching powerlifting programs has made me realize I need to do 10 more hours. You know what I'm saying? But I'm still going to share my thoughts and why I think that actually powerlifters might not hold the key anymore. So some background. This whole video series started off with the assumption that you can copy paste powerlifting programming and apply it to arm wrestling and have that be the optimal way to train for arm wrestling. I made the big 3 video of trying to make the SBD equivalent, the squat, bench, and deadlift equivalent for arm wrestling, thinking, okay, cool, now we have these equivalents, now let's just copy paste a powerlifting program, input, instead of deadlifts, put in the pronation lift, instead of bench press, put in the press lift, and that would output a good result. But there's flaws in that assumption. First of all, the main flaw is that powerlifting is a concentric and eccentric form of lifting, while arm wrestling is an isometric form of lifting. So that by itself throws a wrench in the gears tremendously, because isometrics are trained under different parameters, and they can handle more volume, they can handle more frequency, and they're just less demanding on the recovery than the squat, bench, and deadlift are. Like the deadlift, I mean, shit, a lot of these powerlifting programs say you shouldn't deadlift more than once a week. But as you guys know, like I do a pronation lift every day, multiple times a day, and I'm maxing out every day. And, well, like very nearly maxing out every day. And so the parallels between arm wrestling and training and powerlifting are actually not parallel. They're very divergent types of training. Arm wrestling training is actually more similar to like climbing training and grip training, because those are much more isometric focused sports. There also might be some carryover between strict curl training. I might explore that in a later video. I'm kind of thinking about getting into strict curl powerlifting myself just for fun. Something to do in the arm wrestling off season. But yeah, basically my assumption that you can just copy paste powerlifting parameters into arm wrestling is flawed. I'd like to thank my favorite arm wrestling YouTube channel, T12J7, the masked arm wrestler, for pointing this one out. He has been making some videos about isometric training that I think you guys should all go check out. I'll put a link in the description. I'm not affiliated with him. Like we're not big YouTubers. This isn't some, cartel or something. I just like him, and I think everybody should watch him. So anyway, thanks to T12J7 for bringing this difference between concentric, eccentric training and isometric training to my attention, because that's a very critical piece of information that invalidates the whole copy-paste of powerlifting program into arm wrestling idea. That being said, I still think we can learn from powerlifters programs. I still think that you could do the whole copy-paste thing with the powerlifting program and still make good arm wrestling progress. I just don't think that it's like necessarily like the perfect optimal way to program for arm wrestling. I think you would get even better results by delving into the way that people who do isometric lifting program their lifting. So yeah, I think powerlifting style programming will still probably work to 85% efficacy or whatever. But if you want that full 100% efficacy optimization, you probably need to look to a different sport and learn from them. So anyway, I still want to look at least one powerlifting program and see if the logic behind it would apply to arm wrestling. I did some digging, trying to figure out, okay, what is the powerlifting community's consensus on what the best programs are? Because my personal experience with powerlifting is pretty limited. The closest thing I've done to a powerlifting style program is just starting strength, and that's a really basic program. Anybody could follow it pretty easily, but it's actually a pretty simple system, and it's like B tier in the in the powerlifting world. So I wanted to find, okay, what's the S tier system? And a pretty common consensus is the GZCL program. And I was really happy to see this program is actually pretty easy to swallow. It's pretty simple. At this point where I should probably put up the GZCL image right here or something, or maybe right here. And it's a really cool way of organizing and programming your lifting for powerlifting. Basically, it's a pyramid. You can visualize the program as a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is you don't need to visualize it. I'm gonna have the image here. At the top of the pyramid is the tier 1 lift. So that's your main lifts: your squat, your bench, or your deadlift. The middle tier, the tier 2 lifts, are going to be your primary accessories. So say if you're working your squat, your primary accessory might be a front squat, like a very similar movement to the primary movement, but just done in slightly lower intensity and higher volume. And then at the bottom of the pyramid, you have your tier 3 lifts, which are secondary accessories that are a little more isolated, and you do those with even lower intensity and even higher volume than the tier 2 lifts. So you would do your main moves at 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max for 10 to 15 total reps. You would do your tier 2 moves, your primary accessories, 65 to 85% of your 1 rep max with about 20 to 30 total reps. And at the bottom, you have your secondary accessories under 65% of your 1 rep max with 30 plus total reps. That's kind of where you get into the bodybuilding style of lifting. And I like this program just glancing at it because it's very clear, and to me it just makes sense, right? You have just a very simple structure that is easy to follow, and it makes sense. So I've created a little bit of an arm wrestling style example of what an arm wrestling style GZC. Let me try that one last time. A GZCL example using arm wrestling style lifts. There we go. Now I'll have a new image right here. And basically, I got to pull it up real quick. I just made it. And basically, this style would take one of the big 3 lifts. So big 3 arm wrestling lift, we're going to take the example of pronated back pressure, right? You would have your pronated back pressure, Devin Larratt style deadlift, pronation deadlift, and the tier 1 category, right? So you're going to do 10 to 15 total reps at 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max. And then your tier 2 lift, something that is like a primary accessory to that tier 1 lift. Devin already provided that for us. That high knuckle riser lift, the one where the strap goes here and it's like riser plus pronation. That's a great example of a tier 2 lift to support the tier 1 pronated back pressure lift. And then your tier 3 lifts, like your sort of bodybuilding style lifts, you could take an easy example of hammer curls and that sledge pronation lift that I do. You have the hammer curls to isolate the elbow flexion, and then you have the sledge to isolate the pronation. Those two isolated movements combine into the pronated back pressure lift. So it's that's just a simple example of how you could take the GZCL approach and apply it to arm wrestling. Like I said, I think you could follow this sort of powerlifter style methodology and exercise structure to about 85% efficacy with it's a made up number, by the way, arbitrarily determined, but I just think that extra 15% will get covered by more isometric focused programming. Like I said, powerlifting programming is concentric, eccentric. I still think it works somewhat for isometrics, but like if you really truly want to optimize for isometrics, it would make sense to copy the programming of athletes who only do isometrics, right? So anyway, GZCL, for if you got nothing better to do and you're like, how do I make an arm wrestling plan? How do I build my own arm wrestling plan? Take an example like GZCL and plug in your arm wrestling lifts, and it's better than nothing. Certainly better than just messing around and doing random stuff. But like I said, I think there's even more potential to be gained. Arm wrestlers don't hold the key. Powerlifters don't hold the key for arm wrestling. I think they have a good sledgehammer that can beat down the door, but if you want to just unlock the door and easily walk in, I think we got to look into more isometric style lifting. So yeah, sorry about that. I was hoping that this whole video series would culminate in me being like, oh, here's the god tier program for arm wrestling, but unfortunately it's not that simple. I've learned a lot from this process, and I got to admit that I bit off more than I can chew. And also some of my base assumptions from which I started this program were incorrect. So this is the last episode. Maybe, I don't know, maybe my mind will change in some months. But as of right now, this is the last episode of the Powerlifters Hold the Key series. Powerlifters don't hold the key, but they can beat down the door. So I'm going to do my best to link into the description all of the relevant information, all the videos that kind of influenced this process. Check out T12J7. He's putting out stuff right now about isometrics that is like crucial info for arm wrestlers. Check out the GZCL program. Even if you're not just doing arm wrestling specifics, like I said, it's an S-tier powerlifting program. So, if you just want to like get big and strong through your powerlifting lifts, GZCL is a great one to look at. And yeah, check out my video about the big three. I still think that concept of having big three arm wrestling lifts is appropriate because it really allows you to kind of concentrate on your specific moves. You have a lift that kind of is the representative for each style of arm wrestling, and so you can say, okay, I'm this style of arm wrestler, so I should be focusing on this particular lift and getting it up as high as I can. But like I said, they're isometric lifts, so we need to look to isometric programming, not to concentric eccentric programming, in order to truly optimize those lifts. I'm gonna do some more research. I'll come back to you guys when I got some more sauce. But as of right now, this is the end of the Powerlifters Hold the Key series. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.